Hello, my name is Ruth Keim. Welcome back. This is going to be a continuation of Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 7 that we did in the last part of this series. And so let's go ahead and get started. We are going to be starting in Revelation, and we are going to be mirroring the same pattern that we used in Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 7. And I'm saying 8 first because 8 actually happens first. So look at the screen at the PowerPoint, and you will see, if you remember, this this picture of the kings at the top, the 4, and then the 10, and then the Antichrist at the bottom. So we're going to follow that now into Revelation and see the same pattern that we saw in Daniel. So let's go ahead and get started in Revelation chapter 12, verse 3. Then another sign appeared in heaven. There was a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its 7 heads were 7 crowns. Its tail swept away a third of the stars in heaven and hurled them to the earth. Okay, we're going to stop right there. And I do want to give a warning. Usually I read context all around, but because we have already done it in Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 7, and there's so much to cover tonight, I would just really encourage you to go back yourself and read the verses all around for context. So I'm going to be jumping around and just pulling little parts of verses because I really want to reiterate exactly what these different kingdoms that come before the Antichrist kingdom, what they're going to do and exactly how they're going to behave, okay? So that we can recognize them when they're on the earth. So I want you to keep your hand in Revelation 12, and let's go back to Daniel chapter 8. And verse 10, and we're going to compare what we just read. It grew as high as the heavenly army, made some of the army and some of the stars fall to the earth and trampled them. Okay, we're just going to read verse 10 there. So you see that there is a war in heaven, and some of the stars fall to the earth. Okay, so back to Revelation chapter 12 and verse 3 and 4. I'm going to read it again so you can see how it just parallels. Then another sign appeared in heaven. There was a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its heads were 7 crowns. Its tail swept away a third of the stars in heaven and hurled them to the earth. So we have stars being hurled to the earth. Okay. Now I want to point out, I have this board here, and then you also can see it in your PowerPoint that you have, it mentions right here, the 7 heads. So that's these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, these 7 in the middle, which right here are represented as 4, but remember that the third one has 3 kings. Okay, has 3 heads. So you have, I'm sorry, it has 4 heads. Forgive me. So you have then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, all part of that third kingdom, and then the 7th kingdom. Okay, and they all have crowns, which means they're kings. Okay, they're kingdoms. All right, and then it has the 10 horns of power. All right, so you see these 10 down here. Follow the cursor across. Okay, so I just want you to see the pattern that this keeps on being said. The same thing that was in Daniel 7 and 8. 8 and 7 is now also in Revelation. Okay, so now we're going to Revelation chapter 12, verse 7. She's going to go into more detail about this war. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels also fought. Okay, we're going to stop right there because we're not going to get into that tonight. I'm just showing you that there's this war in heaven that occurs. Okay. Now, we're going to go to Revelation chapter 12, verse 13. Then the dragon saw when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman. Now, we've already been over this in the series before, but I'm just going to remind you this is Israel. And we're going to skip down to verse 17. So the dragon was furious with the woman. Remember, because he couldn't get a hold of her because she was being taken care of for 3.5 years. So he can't get a hold of Israel. This is the people surrounding Judea at the time when the Antichrist comes to power. So those people in Matthew 24 that run to the mountains, this is that group that's kept safe. And when the Antichrist cannot reach them, he turns on the saints. So let's look at that. Verse 17, the dragon was furious with the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commands of God and hold firmly to the testimony about Jesus. Okay, so that is our backdrop that I wanted you to see. Now we are going to pick up at verse 18 of Revelation chapter 12. The dragon stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, and it had 10 horns. Okay, so look up at the board. You got the 10 horns. Okay, and let's take a guess. How many heads is it going to have? It has 7, and 7 heads, and the horns, and its horns had 10 crowns. So now, before it said that the 7 heads had the crowns, now we've got these horns having crowns. Okay, so they're kings and kingdoms. Okay, they rule as kings. And we're going to read further and see that in the beginning, these 10 they're not kings because they don't have a kingdom, but they're given authority to rule as kings. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. And on its heads were blasphemous names. So we're going to write in our PowerPoint on each of these heads, we're going to fill in that it's got blasphemous names. So on each head, there's blasphemous names. That's where I get that, is this little line in this verse. You'll see when we fill it in, that's where this is coming from. So verse 2, the beast I saw was like a leopard. It had its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth were like a lion's mouth. The dragon, okay, so this is all very much represented in Daniel. It's these same animals that we already looked at, okay? But this comes up at the time of the end. Let's keep going. The dragon gave the beast its power. So the dragon is the one giving the power to these 7 kings, okay? Which are the 4 regions, all right? Verse 3, one of its heads appeared to be fatally wounded, and its fatal wound was healed. Okay, the whole earth was amazed and followed the beast. Okay, so let's look at our fill in the blanks and take a look at each of these kingdoms one at a time. So you have the lion, once again, the first kingdom, blasphemous names. Second kingdom, okay, second kingdom is going to be the bear. Bear's feet, blasphemous names. Third kingdom, going to be your leopard. 4 heads, okay? That's that. That's why it's got 3, 4, 5, and 6, okay? So it's kingdoms or kings within a kingdom, okay? And also blasphemous names, all right? Okay, now you have the 4th kingdom, which is different from all the rest, also blasphemous names, but it has a fatal head wound, okay? But this head wound is healed. This causes the whole earth to worship the Antichrist. Another word for the Antichrist is the beast, okay? So we're going to keep reading in verse 4. They worshiped the dragon because he gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war against it?" Verse 5. The beast was given a mouth to utter boasts and blasphemies. It was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. So that's 3.5 years. Okay, so the people surrounding Judea who have run to the mountains, they're being kept safe for 3.5 years. The persecution of Christians is now happening. All right. It began to speak blasphemies against God and to blaspheme the name of his dwelling and those who live in heaven. It was permitted to wage war against the saints and to conquer them. It was also given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All those who live on the earth will worship it. Okay? So let's fill in our next blank. Okay? Each leader becomes king of those 10. Remember how we saw that they have crowns. The 10 horns now have crowns, so they're given a kingdom, or at least a crown to rule as if they have a kingdom. Okay, next blank. All right. The whole earth is amazed and they follow the beast. The people worship the dragon because he gave authority to the beast, and they also worship and admire with words. And so that is if you look over here underneath the picture of the dragon, that's the Antichrist coming up. The one to his left is the false prophet, which we're about to read about. And the one to the right is the image that they set up for everyone to worship. Okay? All right, so let's look at the next. Okay, the beast blasphemes God from heaven. Point 4, the beast is allowed to exercise authority for 3.5 years. We just read that, the 42 months. The beast wages war on the Christians. It controls the entire earth through worship, except for the saints who do not worship him. They do not take this mark. Okay, now we're going to go to verse 11, and we're going to get to this second beast that comes up from the earth. The other one came from the sea or the abyss. This one comes from the earth. So let's get started on verse 11. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all authority of the first beast on its behalf and compels those who live on it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. It also performs great signs, causing fire to come from heaven to the earth in front of people. It deceives those who live on the earth because of the signs it was permitted to perform in the presence of the beast. So let's fill in our blanks for the next page. Okay, this one causes fire. This particular, it's called a beast, but it's a person. Okay, so this particular person comes up and he causes fire to come down from heaven and causes great signs. It uses all these signs to try to deceive the Christians, but of course that doesn't actually end up working. But the Christians the only reason why it's not going to work is because they're watchful and hopefully are very familiar with Scripture, right? And able to go, wait a minute, we knew this was going to happen. Maybe it didn't happen the way we thought it would, but we see that this is fulfilling all that it's saying. Okay, point 10, the beast tells everyone to make an image of the beast. The image is given life and can speak. It has control over all the food and all the items. Okay, we'll keep reading for that. Okay, I think we left off at verse 15. It was permitted to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could both speak and cause whoever would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Verse 16. It makes everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hand or on their forehead, or on his forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. Okay, so he has control over all the food and all the items, so the economy. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Point 13, the people of the earth will not be able to buy and sell unless they have the mark of the beast, the name or number on their forehead. I'll keep reading that. It says the beast's name or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, because it is the number of a person. Its number is 666. Okay, and that word for calculate means figure out. So there is something we have to be trying to figure out. I do think Christians are regularly trying to figure that out. That's a good thing. What I think is not a good thing is becoming really set on it before we know for sure who the Antichrist is. Right now, we don't know who the Antichrist is, so it's not good to, we can have hunches and ideas, but it's not a good idea to set our minds that it's definitely a certain thing when the Antichrist has not been revealed yet. Okay, so let's move on to Revelation 17. So Revelation 17 is going to go over these same this same group that we have been seeing. Okay. Now you're going to notice that in Revelation 13 and 17, there is no mention of the ram and the goat. Okay, so that is not seen. That's only in the book of Daniel chapter 8. All right. So let's look at Revelation 17. And I'm going to skip some of it that has to do, whenever it's talking about the notorious prostitute or Babylon, I'm going to skip over that because that is the next lesson. So I'm going to come back to that, but for sake of understanding how the Antichrist comes to power, we're going to skip over that. Okay. So we're going to go to verse 3, the second half. So Revelation 17, verse 3, the second half. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast who was covered with blasphemous names. Now, we know that we have heard that before. Just in the last chapter, when we did Revelation 13, we saw that all the heads have blasphemous names, okay? And had 7 heads and 10 horns. So this is that same group. Okay, so Mystery Babylon is carried by the beast, which is made of the 7 and the 10, which we've already heard about. All right, so let's go to the next point. Actually, I'll give you a minute to fill that out. Okay, there we go. All right, so the beast comes from the abyss. We are going to skip down to verse 8. The beast you saw that was and is not and is about to come up from the abyss and go to destruction. Okay, so he's going to explain this. The 7 heads. Well, let's keep reading because that's your next blanks. We got to keep reading for it. Okay, so we know that the Antichrist is going to be destroyed at the coming of Jesus. Okay, those who live on the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast that was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind that has wisdom. So I believe this has to do with that little so-called resurrection from the head wound. That's what I am not going to be dogmatic on that, but I am quite sure that is what this is referring to. So let me look at point 4. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains. Let's keep reading. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings. Okay, so that 7 can be called 7 mountains. It can also be called 7 kings. It's both. All right. 5 have fallen. 1 is. The other is not yet, has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain for a little while. The beast that was and is not is itself of the 8th king. Is itself, I'm sorry, an 8th king. But it belongs to the 7th and is going to destruction. We're talking about the Antichrist. Okay? pause there and make sure we're up on our points. All right, so then the next slide, we're going to talk about the 10 horns again. So verse 12, the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings. So if you look down underneath your picture where you have the basically it looks like a T-Rex, just a monster, a beast with all these horns. See at the very bottom how you've got those 10 kings again? Okay, so we're going to go in detail and learn a lot about these 10 kings right now, okay? The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom. But they will receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. So for a short time, they will rule the world, the entire world, okay, for a very short time with the Antichrist. And the Antichrist, remember we learned in Daniel that the Antichrist comes from these 10, from among these 10. All right. These have one purpose. They give their power and authority to the beast. So what is the purpose of these 10? They do 3 things. One of them is to give their power to the Antichrist. So they rule with the Antichrist for a short time. They destroy Babylon, Mystery Babylon. They then also try to wage war against the Lamb. Okay? So let's keep going. These will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will conquer them because he is the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. Those with him are called faithful, chosen, and faithful. Okay. So they make war against the Lord, but they do not win. Now, point number 5, we'll keep reading for verse 15. Pay very close attention to this part. He also said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute was seated are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The 10 horns you saw, so we're still talking about these 10 horns, and the beast will hate the prostitute, which is Mystery Babylon. We're going to learn about that next week. They will make her desolate and naked, devour her flesh, and burn her up with fire. Okay, so together they hated this notorious prostitute. But what do you do with a prostitute? You use them. You don't care about them. You use them and then you discard them. That's how she's going to be treated. Now, interestingly, she was using them. She was riding on them. So that it's like this mutual usury, which is very a perfect picture of what prostitution does, right? Both sides are mutually using each other, and that's what they're going to do. But as it turns out, God also hates Mystery Babylon and he is actually using the Antichrist and these 10 kings to destroy Mystery Babylon. Okay, so let's look at that. It says right here, verse 17, for God has put it in their hearts to carry out his plan by having one purpose, and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that has royal power over the kings of the earth. Okay. So then let's go on to the next PowerPoint. All right, so if we're going down this line of succession of what's going to happen, we've already talked about these 7, which is the 4 regions. And now we've talked about the 10 in really great detail. This one talks a lot about those 10 kings. Now we're going to go down to the Antichrist and what he's going to do, which was really kind of talked about up a little further up in the chapter, but that's the order that it's told to us. So we're just going to review. So point number 1, the beast that was, is not, and will come up. He will come up from the abyss. All except for the Christians will be astonished at this resurrected one. Okay. This calls for a mind of wisdom. So that means that something very difficult is being said here. So it's important I believe, to not get too dogmatic when it comes to those kind of passages. It's very important to know them and have them memorized and do studies on them and to watch. Because remember, it says to the Christians all throughout the New Testament, watch, watch, watch. Okay. All right. Point number 4. He is therefore both the 7th and the 8th king. Now, how could you be the 7th and the 8th king unless you had some sort of resurrection thing going on? That is what I believe it's describing. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it's meaning when it says that. Because he was, and then he wasn't, and then he was again. Okay. All right. He will be destroyed at the return of Jesus, when Jesus returns. Okay. He hates Mystery Babylon and exposes it. This seems to help him to come into power, because it is after that that the kings give all their power to the Antichrist, and he then is going to have supreme rulership. They give all their authority to him. They still are there, though, remember, because they help him wage war against the Lamb when Jesus comes, Armageddon, right? So they're still on the scene, but they've given all their authority to the Antichrist. All right. So, okay. Now what we're going to do is put it all together. Hang on just a minute. All right. So I think Mary has stepped out for just a second. So I will actually tell you a little bit about next week. So next week when we get started, we're going to be picking up talking about the notorious prostitute and where she comes from in history and Mystery Babylon. So Mystery Babylon, at one time when Babylon first started at the Tower of Babel, just after Noah's flood, not too long after, not just after, but a little bit after, it was very pronounced on the earth. And then after a certain time, it became Mystery Babylon and became mysterious. I'm going to talk a lot about that because the Bible talks a lot about Babylon itself, before it was in its mysterious form, and then after it's in its mysterious form, and it confirms a lot of things that are out there about that. So I've done a lot of research on it, and I'm going to try to help you to understand what this is. It's actually a system that's going to be spread out globally, but yet it will have one capital city, I guess you could say, and the Antichrist and these 10 kings will destroy this system, okay, that is very evil, actually. So, okay, let's put this all together. You can see this picture. You have all of this coming together. The leopard, the bear, all this stuff, okay? So if you remember, we've been following the same pattern so that you can see it, right? Okay, near the end of time, the area of Iran will rise 2 times. Now, I did want to clarify, there are 2 different views on this. I think that those 2, the 2 times that they rise to power means 2 times near the end. There is another view that says the first time that Iran rose to power was in the past, and that at the time of the end, they'll rise one last time and be greater than they were before. Either way could be true. So I did want to mention that. Okay. The second time, however, everyone is agreed that it'll be greater because it says that, and that will happen at the time of the end, to basically almost start the pieces going, if you will. If you were playing a game of chess, it's like the thing that gets it all started. Okay. The first piece to move is Iran. Okay. So a Western country will have its first king, an arrogant man who will become greater after he destroys the Iranian power. In the place of this Western king, there will be 4 regions of power in the world. 7 kings will have authority. From the strongest region will come 10 rulers that are not kings at first, but they will rule as if they are kings. That's those 10 horns and kings. From the 10, the Antichrist will come. The 10 will have authority with the Antichrist for a short time and destroy Mystery Babylon together. The 10 will then give all their power to the Antichrist, even though they will still exist, but they will give their authority to the Antichrist. The Antichrist will be arrogant, ruthless, full of intrigue, and I did want to I looked up intrigue a little more. I found it to be very interesting and very important for this study. Intrigue means understanding riddles and mysteries and secrets, spiking curiosity. So I don't know if that means he will be part of the secret or if he will just disclose the secrets of Mystery Babylon. So remember that he discloses and exposes Mystery Babylon. So he has understanding into mysterious things that the rest of the world has been kind of just duped about, okay? So, okay, he's ruthless, he's full of intrigue, he's different, he's deceitful. The Antichrist will oppress the saints, which actually means to wear them out. Be worshipped for rising from a deadly head wound. Seem like a savior or a hero. Rule for 3.5 years with total power. Okay. And that is it. That concludes our study. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and ask those. I know this is a very difficult topic to understand, so I welcome any questions, and I will try to get back with you whenever I can. All right. Thank you very much.